Cloud. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 19th, 2018 edition of the Intuit Developer Friday Morning Hangout. I'm your host, David Leary. I am the Intuit's Global Small Business Ecosystem Evangelist. You can follow me on Twitter at David Leary. Today we have two guests. Vishal and Diana will be coming on to talk about how to take your idea all the way to a published app on the Intuit Developer Platform. And so Vishal Aggarwal, he's been on, I think, 4 or 5 Hangouts as of now. Some of you probably recognize him. He's the Intuit Group Product Manager. You can follow him on Twitter as well. And Diana, she's been on a couple times, and she's an Intuit Developer Relations Engineer. Just a couple housekeeping things before we jump in. Just remember to use the chat for any general comments or tech issues, and use the Q&A panel for any questions that are about today's topic or questions you want to ask the guests. A couple announcements before we begin. We've relaunched the $100,000 Small Business App Showdown. You have 208 days to get your app submitted and live on apps.com. Once you're live on apps.com, you can enter the contest, and we're going to take the top 10 finalists to QuickBooks Connect, and the winner will take home a check for $100,000. So it's a very exciting contest. It's a lot of exposure for you as an app developer, and there's a lot of parts of that event that build up to it. There's a public voting phase. There's social campaigns. Even after the fact, we're doing promotions with the 10 finalists after the event as well. So we're really trying to help apps be successful on the platform, and this is one of those ways we're doing that. Other ways to connect: big events are coming up. Start marking on your calendar. QuickBooks Connect in San Jose is November 5th and through the 7th. And we'll probably have a hackathon the weekend before that, so just start penciling those dates in. Our next big upcoming event is going to be QuickBooks Connect in the UK. So it's going to be in London. You can get to that event. It's uk.quickbooksconnect.com. It's the February 27th and 28th. It's funny that I did a screenshot of the video playing. I just happened to catch True. They built an app at the hackathon, and they're launching on apps.com. So a year later, after the UK hackathon, they were able to publish an app and take part. And the last one is smallbizhacklondon.com. So if you want to be like True and build an app and get on apps.com, you want to show up to the hackathon. So any of you that are in the UK region, please show up on February 24th to the 25th and join the hackathon. And like always, any events, QuickBooks Connect, hackathons, other Hangouts, they're all going to always be found on the events page. So it's developer.intuit.com/hub/events. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing here. There we go. Hopefully you can see me. Vishal, Diana, welcome. Thank you for joining me this morning. I guess I will let you guys introduce yourselves for a little bit, and then if you want to do your sharing and jump in, feel free.
Sounds good. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. We are just going to get started here. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Vishal Aggarwal, and I'm a group product manager here at Intuit for third-party developer experience. I've been with Intuit for over 3 years now, and I'm primarily responsible for developer.intuit.com, app publishing, the different tools we have, auth flows, etc. So anything related to third-party developer, I'm involved in it, and glad to be here. And Diana.
Hey everyone, I am Diana DeRose. I'm a developer relations engineer with the Intuit Developer Group. I mostly work with third-party developers to help them build apps using QuickBooks API and publish them in our App Store. In addition to that, I also manage the Java SDK, and I also create some sample apps and tools for our developer community to use.
Sounds good. So we have a jam-packed agenda today. We are gonna start with an idea and take it all the way to actually publishing that idea as an app on the QuickBooks App Store. Through the journey, we'll show you how to recognize the APIs that you need to work with. How does the integration work with auth? The different sample apps that we have. as well as, other tools that we provide to you as you are going through this journey. So with that, we'll get started.
So hey Vishal, so I volunteer at this nonprofit during the weekends, and one thing that I noticed is that they have a hard time managing donations in QuickBooks. They receive donations through many different formats, sometimes online, sometimes by mail, sometimes people walk in and give them cash. And at the end of the day, their staff has to keep track of all of these receipts and manually enter them in QuickBooks. I think having an app that would do this automatically for them would really save their day.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, Diana, and I think it will definitely help reduce the time it takes to enter all of this and get it done. So I think you are at the right place at the right time. So all you need to do is integrate with QuickBooks Online, and why don't we get started on that? So the first thing we'll do is we'll get onto developer.intuit.com and basically developer.intuit.com. As you land on here, you can see we expose our APIs across the different platforms we support: QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Payments, QuickBooks Desktop. You'll find all the information that you need on developer.intuit.com to take your idea and build the app. So the first step I would recommend is, let's look at our getting started guide. Basically, how do you get started on our platform, right? You start by creating your Intuit developer account. Then you use our API Explorer to make the first API call. Once you have made the API call, then you create your online app within the portal, which will then give you the keys that then you can start using to integrate with the platform. So, to start off, what I want to do, Diana, is I want to first recognize what APIs you would want to use as a part of your integration. So why don't we head over to QuickBooks Online API reference, and this is where we list out all the APIs that are available for our accounting platform. So why don't you give me of the different entities that you think about for your app?
Sure. So some of the use cases that we want to handle is we want to be able to track or keep track of our donors. Mm-hmm. So, just basic name and contact information. Donors are basically people who donate money for our nonprofit business.
Okay, perfect. So, as I think about it, what donor actually is actually a customer. And, basically a customer is to me, the donor relates to a customer where you can store the information about your customer or about your donor. For example, right? If you look at the customer object, basically, we have the first name, last name, we have email address, we have their billing address and everything. So, if I relate, basically, a customer is a donor. So, that's one API that we have identified. What are the other entities?
Vishal and Diana, can I interrupt? Could you do a Control Plus just so that way the text is a little bit bigger in your browser window? That much better. Thank you.
Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is keep track of pledges. So a pledge is basically a promise that the donor makes to give a donation in the future. He's not actually giving money at that time. Mm-hmm. This is just he's making a pledge.
Yeah. So as I think about what a pledge is, a pledge actually relates to an invoice in the accounting system. So an invoice is basically where you create the invoice and you say, hey customer, you owe me this much money. And in this scenario, basically the donor is pledging this money, and that's where you generate the invoice saying, hey donor, here is your invoice for the amount of money you're pledging. So if we look at the invoice entity over here, basically, the invoice object over here identifies the different things that we spoke about, like, how much amount is the donor pledging, and who actually is the donor in this scenario can also be identified through the invoice, which is the customer reference, where you say, hey, this is the donor and this is the amount he's pledging. You can put in the billing address, you can put in the memos, all the other things that you want associated with the invoice, or in this scenario would be the pledge. Wonderful. So what's the next entity?
So now that we've tracked donors and pledges, the next thing that I want to keep track is the actual donations that these donors make. So what would be the entity for that?
So for me, that one is pretty simple. This is where you are actually taking a payment for that invoice or for that pledge. So, the payment entity is the one that records a payment in QuickBooks against an invoice. So, in this scenario, you put in the customer or the donor who actually gave you the money, how much money he gave you, and link it to an invoice that was generated. So if I think about it, overall it's kind of like you have a donor, which is a customer, you have invoice or you have a pledge, that is an invoice, and then finally you have the actual donation, which is the payment. So those are the three entities that you would work with as a part of this app.
Wonderful. So now that we have the APIs identified, how should I begin next?
Yeah. So the next step would be basically the getting started guide that I just went over with, which is like create your Intuit developer account, create your first app, then you start building your app or start developing your app using the auth keys, and then once you are done, you deploy that app, and then finally you release it. So those are the four core steps. But why don't we dive a little bit into some of the things that we have to help you out. So in this scenario, what I've done is we are already logged in, and we have already created an app on the Intuit developer portal. So this is the app that you have created, and this is where you can see the keys that you need when you are building your app.
Wonderful. So before we go ahead, this is great information, but is there a way I can try out these APIs, in a test environment without actually, impacting my production QuickBooks Online company?
That's a great question, Diana. And, that we provide you with two tools here. The first one I want to talk about is the API Explorer. So what the API Explorer does actually is it helps you make API calls against QuickBooks Online companies. And in this scenario, we will actually be working with the sandbox company that we provide to you right out of the box as you create your account on the Intuit developer portal. So, first let me talk about the sandbox that we have. So when you click under your name, you'll see sandbox. And what sandbox is, it's a real QuickBooks Online company that you can use when you're developing your app. However, the sandbox company only works with the development keys. So on the keys tab, there are two set of keys. One is the development key and the other one is a production key. The sandbox company only works with the development keys, but it is a real QuickBooks Online company that you can use as you're building your app. So in this scenario, if I click on go to company, this is the real sandbox company. And as you can see, sandbox.qbo.intuit.com, this is the real company with the real data or sample data that we provide to you right out of the box. So let me go ahead.
Just quick question. So how, I noticed that the sandbox already has some data. So does the sandbox already have test data auto-uploaded into it?
Yeah. So what we do is, when you create a sandbox company, or when we create a sandbox company for you, we actually pre-populate with sample data to help you get started. So, our developers absolutely love this functionality that we provide to them, saying, hey, I can get started in minutes now because I have the sample data in the QuickBooks Online company and I'm good to go, basically.
Wonderful.
So coming back to one more thing I want to add about sandbox is you can actually create up to 5 sandboxes across different regions that we support with QuickBooks Online. So you could actually create a Canadian company, of France, India, QuickBooks Online company, and test your app against those companies before releasing them. So coming back to testing the APIs, right? So, as you can see over here, it will actually list all your sandbox companies as well as your production companies. Mm-hmm. And you can make API calls right out of this tool we call API Explorer. So why don't I actually, show you customer, for example. What I can do here is I can make a query saying select star from customer. And let me make it against one of the sandbox companies. So once I click try it, what it's actually doing is it actually made a call against this sandbox company, and it pulled in all the customers that are there within that sandbox company. So in this scenario, we have 1, 2. Yeah, we have a lot of customers here. But if we go to the customers over here,
This is the production.
yeah, okay. Yeah. So so as you can see, all of these customers actually got pulled in as a part of this API call. And it just not stops there. You can actually test each and every API for all the entities that we support right out of the box here.
Wonderful. And this lets me try out the API without actually writing any code, and I can actually see the exact request that is going in and the response that's coming. One question I had here was, I do see an authorization header here that I don't really understand. Can you explain a little bit more about what's going on there?
Yeah, so this is a perfect segue into how you actually get started with integrating with the platform. And basically, before you can start talking to any QuickBooks Online company, the user of that QuickBooks Online company has to authorize access to that company. And to do that, we use the standard OAuth mechanism. So what happens is that once the user authorizes, you get back a set of tokens that you can then use to make API calls against those QuickBooks Online companies. So let me explain you how OAuth actually works. So what you do is, from your app, you make a call against our URL. You make a get call against /connect/auth2. And what that does is it starts the auth flow. Once the auth flow starts, the user will see an authorization screen. Once the user authorizes, you get back an authorization code on the redirect URI that you have specified when you started the authorization request. Once you have the authorization code, you take that authorization code and you exchange it for basically the access token and the refresh token. Once you get back the access token and the refresh token, now you can use those tokens to make the API call. Now, I understand this is a lot to grasp in 5 minutes. And we actually have a tool that makes it very, very easy for you to understand how auth flows and how auth works. And basically, let me quickly show you that tool. We call it the OAuth Playground, and you can actually get to it from your app's dashboard. So this is our Auth Playground, and what I'm going to do here is the first step, which is getting the authorization code, right? So I'm making a call against the sandbox company, and it has automatically pulled in the client ID and client secret for that app, because those are the two set of credentials you need before you can actually start the the auth flow. And you need to then select the scopes. And what is a scope? A scope is actually saying, hey, user, I want access to this data from your QuickBooks Online company. So in this scenario, you want access to the accounting data. So you select the accounting scope. Once you have selected the scope, then you make the get authorization code call. This is where you initiate the flow for the to start the auth flow, basically. So when you click get auth code, you select the company for which the user, this is where the user comes into the picture, where he will select which QuickBooks Online company he wants the app to have access to. So let me go ahead and select this one. And this is where the user says, yes, I authorize the awesome nonprofit app to talk to the Sandbox US company. Once I hit authorize, you see you got the auth code here, and this is where you now would exchange this auth code for access token and refresh token. So let me click get tokens, And this is where, as you can see, you made a post request where you passed in the auth code, and this is the response where you get back the refresh token and the access token. Now you have the refresh token and access token. Let's just get the company info using these tokens. And there you go. This is the API call that we made using that access token and refresh token to get the company information. So, basically, even before you start integrating with the APIs, you actually need to first integrate with OAuth so that you can get the tokens to make those API calls. And to make, before you get the tokens to make the API calls, the user has to authorize. And this is where, working with Sandbox, using the playground to understand how auth works will really help you. So to reiterate where we have been so far, right? The first thing we did was we identified the APIs that you would work with. We looked a little bit around the different tools that we provide to help you work with those APIs, in particular the API Explorer and the Sandbox. And then finally, we have spoken about auth, which is the first step when you start implementation to get the tokens to make the API calls.
Wonderful. So I think I have everything I need to get started on my app. So let's see how to build the app and how to help my small business, my nonprofit business with their problem. So here's the app that I just built using all the information that you provided. So the very first thing that I did was I went to my app here and grabbed the keys, client ID and secret from the keys tab. And this is my app that I created in Java, and I applied those keys into my app's configuration file. The next thing that I did was I created a redirect URL for the OAuth callback, and I added the callback URL here in my redirect URL section in the app's keys tab. So this basically tells, when I make the OAuth handshake, to send the callback back to this URL. So let me show you how it works, and then it'll be easy to understand. So here's the first page of my app. This is where the nonprofit company owner will go and connect his company to my app. So when I click on connect to QuickBooks, this is where it's doing the OAuth handshake. You can see that the URL that you mentioned in your demo earlier, it's making the handshake now. And once I authorize, in the backend, my callback URL has received the token and did an exchange to get the actual access token. And at this time, my app already has the access token and refresh token. So the next thing that my app will do is sync data from the QuickBooks Online company. So let's try to sync the data and see what happens. So here what I did was I used the access token that we got in the previous step, and I called the customer query that you demoed earlier to get the list of all the customers that was available in my QuickBooks company and present it here. Next, let's try to make a pledge for one of the donors here. So let's click Diego. Let's say he wants to donate $100 or make a pledge first. So let's click on make a pledge. And here it says that the pledge is created. Let's go to the QuickBooks Online company and check whether the pledge actually got created or not. So here's my QB company that I connected my app to. Let me refresh this. I guess I got logged out. All right. So just a minute until it loads completely. Okay. So I'm going to click on donors here and go to Diego. And you can see that the invoice that I just created is here. And within the invoice, you can see that I added a line item for donation with amount 100. Next, let's go and make a donation against that pledge. So I'm going to hit Diego again and change it to $100 and click on make a donation. So it's saying donation complete, donation ID 30. So let's go back and see if the donation was actually made or not. So I'm going to refresh here. And you can see that the invoice got paid. So the invoice, and this is the donation or payment that I actually created with ID 13. So that's the basic step. Let's take a look at the code a little bit to see how I actually did build this app. So it's a very simple code. I just have 3 main classes here, and I reused a lot of the code that was already available in the OAuth and CRUD samples.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Diana?
Sorry?
Do a zoom in on your IDE.
Oh, okay. Maybe, how about this?
Font size.
Bigger? No?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Do people just say zoom? Yeah, I think there's a zoom, yeah.
No.
No, that's not it either. What do people do in Eclipse? Is it a...
What makes Eclipse go? I think I zoomed this.
We killed Eclipse. It's okay.
Just kill it. It's just somewhere behind. Oh, I think it's here. Okay. Oh. Okay.
There we go. I don't know what people usually click. Vishal, what do people usually do to change the font size in Eclipse fast?
Can we try?
Editor, maybe?
Appearance.
No.
All right.
All right. We can, if we can't zoom in, that's fine. We'll have to catch that next time.
David, we'll have this sample is all available on GitHub. So, if any of our developers want it, feel free to go to our repository.
Okay, so they can just pull it down and it's exactly what you have on the screen right now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's good to know. And that's on the GitHub. Perfect.
Yeah, so a lot of the code that I used in the sample, I reused a lot of the OAuth and CRUD sample that was available already in the Intuit developer GitHub repository.
Yeah.
And I could reuse most of it and use it. I also used Intuit's Java SDK for this code.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, that's really awesome, Diana, that you use a Java SDK. And, actually we support SDK in 3 different languages, which is primarily Java, PHP, and .NET. And there are some community supported SDKs as well that you can use if you want. And we have a bunch of other samples available on our GitHub repository that I will show you later on.
Sure. So the first thing that I did was created a class to handle the connect to QuickBooks button. And as you can see, I used the Java SDK. So my work was very simple. It did most of the heavy lifting for me. So all I had to do is just build this request object where I put in my client ID and secret. And then I had to specify the scope that I wanted, which is accounting. And then I used the SDK's helper method to prepare the authorization URL. And just like 3 or 4 lines of code, and my first authorization call is ready in this class. And next thing that I did was create a callback endpoint. And again, the callback endpoint is very simple. All it's doing is it's getting back the code and the realm ID that comes back from Intuit as part of the OAuth handshake. And I'm using that code. Again, I'm using the SDK's helper method here to retrieve the actual access token and refresh token. So as you can see here, I'm just initializing the OAuth platform client that the SDK provides, and I'm calling the retrieve bearer token method of the SDK, passing the auth code that the handshake that I received as part of the callback, passing the redirect URL, and all of the API HTTP request is already handled by the SDK, and I have my access token and refresh token back. So this is the whole OAuth stuff. Next, I have a QBO controller, and this basically has just very simple controller. It has 3 methods: one to sync the customer, one to make a pledge, and the other one to make the donation. Let me show you what I did to get the customer data. So like Vishal had demonstrated earlier, you can just write a simple SQL-like query, select star from customer. In this case, I'm just grabbing the top 10, first 10 customers. So my query looks like this: select star from customer, start position 1 to results 10. And again, I'm using the SDK's service method, data service method to execute this query and get my customer object back. So here's what I'm doing. I'm initializing the service class using the access token that we received and the realm ID. So this basically tells the service to grab the data from this particular company, and I'm passing the auth access token associated with that company into the service method. And then it has a method called execute query where I'm passing my SQL that I use to grab the customer data, and it retrieves back the customer information for me. Similarly, to make the pledge, I'm again using the service method, but at this time I'm using the service method's data services add method to add the invoice. So before I do that, I have to prepare the invoice request or the invoice object. And again, all of this code I reused from the CRUD sample that was already available. The only dynamic variables here was the customer ID that I selected from the screen and the amount that I entered. So like Vishal was explaining earlier in the invoice JSON, we have to set the customer reference to specify who this invoice is for. So I'm setting the customer reference here using the ID, specifying the amount. And then I'm also making the donation. I'm against an item called donation. So I'm grabbing the item list using the name donation, and I'm setting the line item as donation here. And that's all here for creating the invoice request. And once my invoice request is built, I pass that on to the service methods service classes add method, and my invoice gets created. Again, this add internally calls the actual QuickBooks API to create the invoice, passing the access token that I created. And similarly for payment, very similar to invoice, I've created the payment object here, passing the customer ID amount. And one other thing here I've done is I'm linking the invoice that I created in the previous page into the payment object. So this basically tells that the payment is made towards that particular invoice. And once my payment object is ready, I'm again passing the same payment object into the data services add method to actually create the payment. So it's just 3 classes, and my app is done. And if you want to take a deeper look, it's also available in our GitHub repository.
Yep. This is awesome, Diana, and I'm pretty sure your nonprofit would definitely help from this app. But you know what? I think a lot of other nonprofit would benefit from this app as well. And you know, I think you should roll this out to everybody. And you know, we have a mechanism for you to do that and actually make your app reach out to a lot of small businesses, a lot of businesses that align with this app through channels like QuickBooks Online. We have an app store right within QuickBooks Online. We have the apps.com, as well as we just rolled out apps tab within the accountants QuickBooks Online accountants as well. So you know what I would highly recommend is that we take this app and actually publish it to the app store so that a lot of other small businesses can use this app as well. And to do that,
yeah, that's a great idea. Can you show me what needs to be done?
So, you know, once you go into your app, right, this is your awesome nonprofit app. You know, what you really need to do is, you know, you need to fill out your settings. You know, you need to fill out your icon. You have already selected the APIs, the app name, the permalink, which is basically a short URL for your app, the countries that you will accept QuickBooks Online connections from, you know, whether you use Intuit single sign-on or not. And this is where, you know, as a part of our app store, a user can automatically log into your app using Intuit credentials. And we highly recommend this as one of the things, you know, you implement for your app so that it's a seamless flow for for end users to actually connect your app to their QuickBooks Online company. And then we have a bunch of other settings around, development and production URLs, basically. So once you have finished, the settings tab, what you need to do is you need to go and fill out your app listing, where you select, the categories that, your app relates to, and, fill out the app cards for different regions. So in this scenario, let's look at the United States app card. And this is where, you basically fill in a tagline, your company URL, different screenshots, video, and what are the different pricing model, what are the key benefits, and all of this data. Once you fill out this data, you can actually see a preview of your app card from right here. And this is how your app card would look within the different channels of our app store. And when the user hits Get App Now, he's basically connecting your app to their QuickBooks Online company. So once you have finished all of this, all you need to then do is go ahead and submit your app for review, which is right here. You select the region for which you want to do it, and you click submit. And once you have submitted, what happens is, basically we receive your submission, and your app goes through 3 different reviews. One is the technical review, where we make sure your app is working as per the requirements. Then we do a security review, and then we do a marketing review. And all of these reviews are free of cost to you. Actually, publishing to our app store is actually free of cost to you. And, we don't take any rev share or anything like that. Basically, all the customers that sign up, you get to keep that money. So, App Store is a really nice way for you to actually get your app in front of a lot of developers, a lot of users, basically. And you know what? I love this process. So I'm going to give it a 10.
Wonderful. This is great information, and I'm surprised, and I'm so helpful that within an hour we were able to, get started and all the way build the app and publish it into an app store. So this is really wonderful.
Yep. Some of the other things I do want to call out as we go towards ending this session is we do have functionality like webhooks, where basically, if your app is constantly pulling in data from QuickBooks Online, rather than constantly polling for data, you can actually implement webhooks where you can actually say, hey, for this app, I'm interested in any changes that happen to, say, account, for example, right? And I'm interested in create, update, and delete changes or merge changes. And whenever any change happens for those entities, we will send you a callback on the URL that you mentioned here. What that does is it helps reduce load on your side, where you don't have to continuously poll us for changes. We will do a push notification when any change happens. Couple of other things I want to call out is, we do have our GitHub repository, GitHub where we have a lot of samples in different languages for developers to look at to help them get started, as well as our SDKs are open sourced. So, you can go to our GitHub repository and download the source code if that's what you want to do. We accept pull request as well on those SDKs or on the samples. So we have a lot of things to help you get started right away. And I think your sample your app was a perfect example of it, where you use the SDK and you use the CRUD sample to just get going and build out the app in hours, basically.
Right.
So with that, we will open up for any questions.
Yeah, first off, I'd say this is great. Very smooth, very nice presentation. It's, I think it really, we're always looking for this end-to-end view of everything you have to do. And like you've touched on everything from like creating a developer account, touching on OAuth, getting in and going to the App Store. Like you've really taught all the tools and the downloads that are available. So you're really giving a really good real life scenario, right? Of you have the idea and move it all the way through to get it up on apps.com. That's great. Let me just check and see if any of the attendees have any questions. If you have a question, please use the Q&A panel. If not, I think we can wrap up here soon. So again, just to reiterate, developer.intuit.com is where you create your account. You can access all the tools and docs there. All the samples in this video Diana has on GitHub, so you can actually see the code she actually used. Correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. Awesome. And it doesn't look like there's any questions coming in from the panel. I think is a very good overview. And what we'll do is I'm going to stop the recording and get this on YouTube so people can watch it after the fact. But for now, thank you, Vishal. Thank you, Diana. We will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Bye.
Bye.